Item 10E, adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a contract with Telecommunications Engineering Associates in the amount of $65,000 for the installation of 911 replacement equipment.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm Neil Telford, your Police Chief, and with me tonight is Debbie Shembry. She is our Records and Communications Supervisor. Before you tonight is our request to replace our 911 controller and expend approximately $65,000 to install the equipment to be redundant with another 911 service provider. The Police Department's Communication Center receives all 911 calls made in San Bruno, and that includes landline and cellular phones. On average, we receive about 1,100 911 calls a month. That includes actual 911 calls and 911 hang-up or misdials. Communication centers, or public safety answering points, and they're also referred to as PSAPs, are eligible to receive funding to replace or upgrade equipment every 5 years from the state of California 911 Emergency Communication Office. Our current 911 controller was put in service in 2005, and we believe that it's time for this equipment replacement. When the equipment was installed, the state covered maintenance for this equipment for 5 years. That 5 years has expired. Now that amount gets deducted from the amount we're eligible to receive from the state. Staff at the Police Department researched the vendors listed in the state's master purchase agreement, and we selected Intrado as a preferred vendor for the 911 controller. The Intrado product was within the state's allotment that they give to San Bruno. The Intrado product was also capable of accepting next generation technology. So that includes text messages and photos being received on the 911 system. It's actually pretty exciting. It should be noted that the state hasn't figured out what exactly those specifications are going to be for next generation compliance, nor have the cell phone providers figured out how they're going to get this material to the 911 centers. We're hoping that is figured out soon, but it's important to note that Intrado has advised us that they're capable now of receiving that information, and they believe that just with the software upgrade, they'll be able to address any issue that is changed from the state or the cell phone providers. While researching, the Intrado product also has another wonderful feature, and it allows that communication center or public safety answering point to connect with another public safety answering point that also uses the Intrado product. The agency is then capable of answering 911 calls, and if they're connected with radio equipment, they can dispatch a call. So for example, if we pair up with another Intrado provider and our radio communication is configured correctly, we could dispatch for that agency and vice versa. This is extremely important when 911 centers are overloaded, and as I'm sure all of you remember, in 2010, when the pipeline exploded, we had one dispatcher on duty, and we had one records clerk on duty to handle that extremely high volume of calls. Fortunately, we were able to ring all of those, or a lot of those 911s over to county. While researching this equipment, we had discussions with members from Burlingame Police Department. And also, Intrado has generated a lot of interest from other 911 centers, and especially in San Mateo County. There are several agencies in San Mateo County that are currently looking at Intrado because of that redundant capability. But we had discussions with Burlingame because Burlingame is configured similar to San Bruno. There are times where they staff their dispatchers in a 24-hour period with one dispatcher, same as San Bruno. They also use the same computer automated dispatch or CAD and RMS or records management system as San Bruno does. Connecting these two agencies with the Intrado product combined with the same CAD and RMS system provides immediate backup in an emergency. So if there's a dispatcher that is sick, we can flip the switch and go to Burlingame. Burlingame's able to dispatch the officer, take the call from San Bruno, and send it right to the officers in San Bruno, including to the cars. So it's hard to keep all these acronyms together, and I have a hard time keeping track of them myself. So it's easier or helpful to think of Intrado as the 911 telephone system, and Intrado also will handle the business lines, and the CAD, or Computer Automated Dispatch and Records Management System, RMS, as the record-keeping component of police, and it stores all the archives for all the calls we go on. So it keeps track of time, who called us, all police reports are stored in there, all of the information distributed to the officers in the car goes through the Computer Automated Dispatch. These two systems complement one another, but they are separate. With the exception of a few cities that include San Bruno and Burlingame, most San Mateo County law enforcement agencies use the same CAD and RMS system. We're not one of them. We're one of 6 agencies that use a different system, and of those 6 agencies, we share the same Computer Automated Dispatch and Records Management System with 5 other agencies, including Burlingame. It is important to note that these agencies, these 6 agencies, are considering going to a different vendor for their CAD and RMS. We are as well. It's going to be a costly effort, but we will be bringing that to you with the capital improvement budget in the coming months. Both San Bruno and Burlingame contract with Telecommunications Engineering Associates, or TEA, to provide maintenance and service of our 911 communication center. TEA was contacted regarding the connectivity of Intrado system and connecting San Bruno and Burlingame. So that includes being able from San Bruno to control the intercom systems at Burlingame, the door locks at Burlingame, the camera system at Burlingame, electronic gates, and vice versa. They would be able to control ours as well. So everything could be done remotely. This is something new, and it would be the first time that something like this occurred in San Mateo County. It would also involve connecting phone lines to San Bruno, likewise in Burlingame, and connecting the agencies with the T1 communication line. This compatibility, as I said, will allow dispatch to handle each other's calls for service in the event of an emergency or of an overload in 911 calls. And it also supports some of the conclusions and recommendations made in the recent grand jury report on police dispatch. And those recommendations included to develop arrangements with other agencies for dispatch consolidation, to consolidate or increase dispatch staff in centers so that no center has less than 2 dispatchers during off-peak hours, and to develop backups and redundant systems for dispatch centers. San Bruno's portion to connect San Bruno and Burlingame's dispatch center is estimated at about $65,000, and that includes equipment installation and consulting costs associated with the connecting the 2 agencies. Now, we had a discussion with TEA, and we said, really, this much money? And he said, well, because this is a new venture, they estimated high, but we're not sure that it's going to be that amount. The cost for the Intrado 911 project is $196,800 and includes staff training and annual maintenance for 5 years. This amount is covered by funding from California's 911 Communication Office, and it should be noted that we've been in contact with the state over the past year regarding our equipment replacement. Last week, we were notified that we had to have our current vendor provide us with a letter that our equipment has reached the end of its serviceable life. This was a new requirement. In all of the time where 911 funding has come across, the agency's never been required to submit a letter by the current vendor saying that its equipment has reached the end of its life. Today, I received notice that the manufacturer of our current equipment has notified the state that their system is still usable. However, they acknowledge that it's outdated and it's not the newest technology. We're in dispute of this fact, as our vendor is a competitor of Intrado, and our current vendor did give us a bid when we were researching the vendors for 911 systems. It should also be noted that we had 2 911 stations within the last month be in need of repair. They fixed one of those stations. They gave it back to us. It didn't work because they had installed new software. They had to downgrade that software to get that repair to actually work again. We're working with the state to obtain approval for the equipment replacement, and tonight we're asking your approval of the $65,000 expenditure to connect with Burlingame. Of course, that connection and that expenditure would be contingent upon approval from the state, and if the state does not give us approval or if there are any issues, of course, we're not going to move forward. That concludes my presentation, and Debbie and I are here to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions of the chief for Debbie? Michael?
Through the chair. Chief, you mentioned that the systems require a dedicated T1 connection between both departments, ours and Burlingame's.
Yes.
What's the annual cost of a dedicated T1 line these days?
That's for the road. Bear with me, council member.
Okay. And I guess it's not critical to this discussion. I was curious, though, because that is going to become part of our operational costs going forward, and that wasn't really addressed in the report. So when I heard that, the light bulb went off. But if you don't have it in front of you, that's fine. We can.
It's originally estimated at $9,600 per year, billed monthly.
9,600. Okay, about 10,000 a year. Okay, thank you.
And Rico?
Didn't have any questions. The only thing I wanted to say to Debbie and to the 911 dispatchers and those folks that work in the office, thank you for the job you do.
Thank you. Appreciate your recognition, Council.
Anything else? Any action?
We'll go ahead and introduce the resolution for adoption, please.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember Ibera.
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar.
Aye.
Vice Mayor O'Connell.
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye.